Hey, everybody, it's Richard Harrison, Scott Leese with the Surf and Sales Podcast here with another episode. As we slowly start to wrap up 2020, we are super excited to have our guest today from a professional Major League Baseball team. I'm going to let Scott introduce him. But obviously want to give a quick shout out to Vidyard, Gong, and Lead 411, our December sponsors. So thank you to all of them for supporting us and helping us do these things. And Scott, I'm going to let you take it over for a second and while I get something set up.
Well, with that intro, everybody's probably expecting Miguel Cabrera to be on the show or something like that. But I hate to let everybody down. We're actually talking with Director of Ticket Sales for the Detroit Tigers, Andrew Sidney. Welcome to the show, Andrew.
Scott, Richard, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, man. You've been in ticket sales and group sales in professional sports for quite a long time, and it's like a marriage of my two favorite subjects, sales and sports. So take us back to the beginning a little bit. Like, how did you get into sports and ticket sales, and why did you get into it?
Yeah, happy to. For me, when I first was graduating school at Ithaca, Ithaca College in New York. I'm from there originally. I always wanted to be involved in sports. I didn't really know how to do that. I actually played, baseball for a couple of years there. And I knew I wanted to get involved with sports. I just wasn't sure how. Took sport management at Ithaca College and opened my eyes to different avenues that you could go down. And I know we talk a lot, and I listen to the podcast, and we, you guys talk a lot about people who want to be in sales, right? Like, show me you want to do this career. And I had no idea I wanted to do this career. I was like, hey, I just want to be in sports and I'll figure it out. And I got a couple of opportunities after I applied to work for my hometown team, the New York Mets, or a minor league baseball team in Dallas, Texas, called the Frisco Rough Riders. And after talking to some of the leadership there and understanding what sales meant and what went into it, and how competition and attitude and work ethic, the more you put in, the more you get out, really makes a difference. I decided to go to Frisco because the leadership there seemed like they at the time, had a little bit better of a plan for me and what my career was going to look like. So I decided to get in there. I started in sales. I hated the first 3 months of it. I was making 100 cold calls a day. Like, what is going on here? Why am I here in Dallas? I don't know a soul. And my support system, my family was just like, look, give it another 3 months, see how it goes. You could always come back here. And after, kind of getting more mentorship, fully investing myself in this as a career and not just a job, things started to turn around. I got more confidence, made some more connections in Dallas, and it kind of took off from there. So spent 5 years in Dallas and in Frisco, in a great suburb, and really loved it, and then had an opportunity to kind of jump to the NBA at that point, and that's where this all started, I guess.
What's so interesting to me, and I believe this is true, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I know people who play professional sports. I know folks who coach at the collegiate level as well as the professional level, and one of the things that just becomes a part of your life is the transient nature of the business. Like, you are moving on from one city to the next, one franchise to the next, and in your, work and at the organizational level, like, you're changing sports, right? Like, you're going from minor league baseball to the NBA to Major League Baseball. That comes with the territory, it seems, right? So can you talk about, like, why is that lifestyle, appealing, and how hard it is to uproot yourself from New York to Frisco to Houston to Detroit, and how people who are thinking about getting into that industry should think about that stuff as they weigh whether or not it's the right fit for them?
That's an awesome question. It's not something I knew going in. It was something that I was like, hey, I'm gonna move to Frisco and see how it goes, and then figure it out. Maybe I'll be in Dallas. Maybe I'll move back to New York. Who knows? But I think just like a player on the field, right? Like, sometimes, and I kind of equate this to our sales staff too. Like, if you're a young prospect and you're working your way up, right, in AA, AAA, you finally get that call up to the big leagues. And Miguel Cabrera is sitting at third base right in front of you, and you play third base, and he's in the prime of his career. How are you going to get playing time, right? Either you become better at another position, or you get really good at what you do, and to a point where your value is so high that they can trade you, and you have to go to a new team, or you leave as a free agent, right? And that's how I kind of look at our business side too, right? Like sometimes the opportunities for growth aren't there internally, because there's equally somebody really good right there who's not planning on going anywhere in front of you, and you have to look outside the organization to get that growth.
It's so interesting to me. It's so interesting to me how naturally that way of thinking has evolved in your sales industry, and how unnatural that is in software sales. I mean, I that's how I always thought about it, but I know for a fact people don't think about it that particular way. I think that's a really good call out.
Yeah, and go ahead, Richard.
No, go. I want to go add on to that because I'm going to ask you a different question.
No, I think it's interesting. I was just going to comment on the path of software, as a solution, and then sports. Like I read all the stuff that you guys send out because I feel like there's a lot of connections, but then there's also stuff that, to Scott's point, just doesn't compute on both sides just yet. So it's just interesting.
So, we talked to a couple of professional athletes, Scott included, who've told us that, the best way to make your mark is to find the biggest, baddest guy on the team and go knock him out, right? This is one of Scott's favorite stories about himself, but as well as an NFL player. Do you feel like it's that competitive? Is it in the bullpen, right? In your office with the team, do you feel like that competitive nature is super high in professional sports ticket sales, or no, it's just like any other sales team when you talk to your other friends who are salespeople?
It's a great question. I think certain folks are like that. Certain folks aren't. I think certain organizations are like that too. Like in Frisco, when I started, super competitive. A lot of competitive people. You had to outwork everybody and do it in a.
What's that mean in ticket sales though? Like that's,
So in Frisco, for example, we had territories, right? So you were only assigned out a territory that you could go into on specific zip codes. But if you got a referral to someone else's territory, like you could go into their territory and sell something. And that was always super competitive. Like who can get the most referrals in someone else's territory to go say, hey, guess what, Scott, I just sold something in your territory. Like you better work harder. Staying late, getting there early. I mean, our hours were 7 in the morning, 7:30 in the morning to 6:30 at night. Like it was a lot of hours working games. It was challenging. So just high work ethic, and then always on, right? You're always trying to think about that next sale. That's how I term, the competitive.
Scott, you just missed out, man. This would have been your ideal first sales job, right?
Although it really would. It really would have been. Yeah.
How hard is it? Like let's not talk about 2020. We will talk about that, but like, is it harder selling in Frisco than it is to sell in, Detroit or in a normal time, right? Like, do people really want to buy season tickets to the AA or AAA team or the single A team?
Yeah. So it's interesting. And it's fun to have minor league and major league experience because the big difference is the players, right? Like the win-loss records matter in pros versus minor leagues. So I can make the argument that in the minor leagues, it's almost easier because your play on the field really does not affect you at all. You're just talking about value, experiences. You're talking
love of the game, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. You're talking to businesses about their employee recognition program, your client retention. How do you prospect for new business? And they understand that, and it doesn't matter if you're good or bad. Here in Detroit, right? Like we have a bad team, like the elephant in the room. The team's not performing well, but there's always hope for the future. And what I've discovered about the market here is that everyone's a fan because it's the only team in Michigan that plays during the summer. Everyone's a fan of the Tigers. So if you own a business, it could affect if you look at it as a fan or as a business owner. So that becomes challenging. And then in Houston, the team was good. So we had a lot of momentum, but your sales processes still need to be there in order to take advantage of how how the team's doing on the court or on the field.
There's always next year, Richard. That's like the line that never ends in sports.
You're either selling wins or you're selling hope. Either one.
That's right. That's right.
Isn't that everybody? You're selling the win or you're selling the hope. So that's
right.
good. I think that's the title. I think we just got the title of our podcast.
Let me ask you, the question I want to ask you now, Andrew, is what do folks in your industry do better than people who are selling software? What are y'all better at that our listeners who are not in this industry, who are in the software sales industry or hardware or whatever, what are you guys better at than us? What do we stand to learn from you?
Ooh, that's a tough one, because I look at people who are not in the sports industry and selling other products. I mean, I learn from those people all the time. I think there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. You talk a lot about, sales ops and rev ops. Like we don't really have that, right? We're knocking on doors and making.
Well, I asked you this question on purpose because I know there's a lot of things that, we could bring to the sales industry and sports and candidly have a massive fucking impact. But I'm curious in the flip side, like there's got to be some things I think that you all do better than some of us do. And so I'm curious if you can pinpoint any of those things, even if it's just a hunch and not based on any kind of fact or data. Yeah,
I think when I look at some of our top reps, the things that they do really well are, they're gritty, number one, right? They're always, their grit is at a super high level. And then number two, just most of our success is on the B2B side when it comes to our top reps, when they're pitching other businesses. Our process, how we implement creativity and into our sales pitches and using the fun of sports, I think that can differentiate us a little bit when it comes to what we're doing on a sales side. So, at the end of the day, we're selling fun, we're selling entertainment, and we are able to implement that, I think, a little bit more into our sales focus, our sales pitches.
That's true. I don't know how many pitches there are that are selling fun when somebody's selling HR software. Richard, what do you think?
I agree with you. Like you are selling something even if they don't necessarily like sports, at least it's, it's probably the easiest way to say, hey, it's not you, they don't like sports, right? Like it's probably the easiest one. They don't care. Just out of curiosity, how big is, again, not in 2020, how big is an average sales team at a professional sports that you've seen or experienced?
Yeah, I think on average, it's anywhere from 20 to 30 salespeople on a floor, including, we have a service team as well that handles kind of our retention of season ticket members and things like that.
Are those separated out in the org? Are those two different functions, or are those all rolling under one?
Usually they're two different functions that end up rolling up to a VP who oversees the whole department.
See.
Got it. So you talked about sales process not being there or ops. What kind of things do you wish you could bring in?
Yeah.
Why haven't they?
That was the next question.
What's the barrier?
Yeah. I think some of it's just straight up resources on, where people are putting their focus on money, right? Like we're paying for a lot of players, and that's where a lot of the funds go. I think looking at different suggestions, I think number one would be a sales operations team. There are I know one team definitely has this already. The MSG has a lot of different resources that in the Knicks and the Rangers that they're able to utilize some different techniques and some technology a little bit further advanced than some other organizations. I think sports is just naturally, sports is just behind on the business and sales side. I think we're just getting into figuring out Zoom, right? Like that's new for us. It's new for everybody. just looking at it like they're almost like 5 to 10 years behind. Like our CRM that just kind of started in sports maybe 7 or 8 years ago, like getting everyone's information in a database and using it to sell at a higher level and making the organization more connected and everyone can see everything. So I think we're just a little bit behind there. And I don't know the reason as to why. I think like if you look at baseball 20 years ago, right, there was really maybe 1 or 2 salespeople that handled everything. There was a box office that handled season ticket members, and there was no traditional sales outreach. So a lot of this is just getting started. So it's kind of cool to be on that piece and then have opportunities to add and suggest things that we think will make the company and business run better.
Is the strategy, how does the strategy differentiate when you're selling sponsorships versus season tickets or, the suite level tickets and things like that?
Yeah, so on the ticket sales side, when you're talking about just, Joe Smith, who's buying 4 season tickets for him and his family, our strategy is to call them, email them, leave text, get them down to the ballpark and show them their seats and get that emotion, talking about the crack of the bat, the smell of hot dogs, the smell of the field, right? Get them emotionally connected and remembering their memories of what it was like for them as a kid at a baseball game, and selling them hopefully there, right? But that strategy is quantity over anything else. How many people can we get in? How many calls can we make? How many emails can we send? How many texts? How many people can we get to raise their hand that we can reach out to? So that's on the ticket sales side. When it comes to premium and corporate partnerships, it's a little bit more, I think, struggling for the word, just less about the quantity and more about the quality of the approach. It's a little bit slower of a process. It takes a little bit of a longer time to get that done, multiple meetings, going to their office, inviting them to the park, all that good stuff.
But so talk about the specific tactics. Like, okay, you're the only game in town in the summer, but like, let's say, you're trying to sell to Richard.com. Okay. Like there's the Tigers, there's the Lions, there's the Pistons. Maybe there's people who are sponsoring in the stadium at Ann Arbor or with Michigan State and all the other, like, big games in and around town and around the state. Like, how do you tactically approach somebody who's maybe sponsoring nothing as of yet? And then what about the people who are sponsoring the Pistons, but not the Tigers? Like, am I talking to Richard and I'm selling for the Tigers? And I'm like, listen, you don't want to support the Pistons, okay? You want to support the Tigers. Like, what are you saying? I'm so curious about this.
No, so we never really try and talk bad about the other teams, right? Because that's kind of a faux pas. We don't want to do that.
I wouldn't think so, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, we try to avoid that. I think our approach is essentially to talk about what we've seen other companies that have been successful. So we'll use testimonials and examples of other companies that work with us now that are hopefully in a similar space, similar industry. So we'll try and tie that back and we'll name drop some folks in that industry that work directly with us in the hopes that spurs whoever we're talking to say, oh shit, they're working with the Tigers. Like if they're sponsoring Comerica, we got to do that too, right? Like, or if they have a premium suite at Comerica, like we need one of those also. So we'll try and name drop, set up an appointment, do a lot of face-to-face that way for those higher end sales. So that's the approach. I mean, it's a call to get them on or an email, hopefully to set up a phone call, to set that meeting, get that face-to-face appointment, do a discovery, come back to the office, invite them down for a lunch, and then do a pitch. So that's the strategy. I hope that answers the question on how we approach going after those people.
Yeah, for sure. I love it. It's super curious to me.
So let's dive into 2020, right? Like, how has it? I mean, I can only assume it's rough. What are you hearing? I mean, it's probably the hardest objection specific to your industry in sports. than anything, which is, what are we doing? Like, we can't come to the stadium. We can't do anything. How did you guys adjust to that?
I mean, it rocked our world just like everybody else. But, with our industry and sports, it's probably going to be the last thing that comes back to full capacity of what we used to be like, or whatever that was. Our organization, the Illich family has done such an amazing job with our employees. I mean, we've seen it throughout sports, layoffs and furloughs. Like our staff is relatively intact moving forward, which is tremendous. For us, where our main focus when this whole started was how can we continue to work and be productive. So that was just a lot of prospecting, and checking in with our clients. Like a lot of teams didn't make a call or touch base for a few weeks during COVID when it first started in March. They just shut down, right? So we kind of took
because what are you selling right now? Like you're not selling anything in the moment, right?
No, not selling anything. The only thing we were selling is the fact that we cared about our clients, right? So that care and that that more service oriented approach we took. We made a lot of phone calls to our season ticket members, just checking in with them, not even talking about baseball or sales or anything, just how you doing, right? So we took that approach. We did a lot of training, and then we started making outreach once we realized that the whole season was going to be impacted and we're not going to have fans. To have folks keep their funds on account for this year, for 2020 into 2021. So a lot of our job was those calls, and now we're actually selling for 21. Just like we normally would, and we'll adjust as needed as April approaches.
You said something interesting. So we did a bunch of training, right? Like you stepped back and you did some internal things. Like, what kind of training do you teach at? I mean, I'm assuming it's very similar to everywhere else, but is there something different you have to teach people to do when selling tickets, and particularly at this stage?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very similar. We have sales scripts and a playbook that we operate off of. So it's a lot of it's role playing, making sure people are on their game. So we did a lot of that. One of the trainings we ran through was a LinkedIn branding training on LinkedIn, right? Like, how do you get your profile to a point where people want to talk to you, right? And it's not just a resume. It's how you're using that to increase sales and increase your brand online.
So what are those tips? Like, Scott and I talk about this a lot. I'm curious, like, what kind of advice are you giving to folks on their LinkedIn brand? I'm curious how much it overlaps with the way we do things.
Yeah, a lot of it's fundamental because most of the people we hire are right out of school, and they start off in what we call an inside sales program, where they're working for 6 to 12 months, first job. They maybe didn't even have a LinkedIn profile, right? At this point, a lot of college kids do, but they may not. So how to get yourself to stand out, right? It's like, put a professional photo in the profile, right? Don't have a photo of you drinking beer at college, right? Like, that's where we start, literally, the fundamentals of what it is. How do you write your about page, your summary page? How to search LinkedIn for leads and opportunities, keywords. How to comment on different things, what groups to join. It's a lot of it's fundamental. How do you get your connections up so it says 500 plus, right? Like, all of these little things that I think are best practices. We would never have the time. This was what was interesting, is we wouldn't have the time to sit down and do an hour, 2-hour training on that during the season. It's too crazy. But with COVID, that gave us time to step back, and our executive team challenged our leadership team. Hey, what can we do that we normally wouldn't have a chance to improve our sales process and improve our salespeople?
Well, you have to work on inside sales training as well as face-to-face sales, depending on the role, I suppose, because you're selling at events or at the games themselves. Two very different animals, right? So you're
Absolutely.
sort of training, like, you have this hybrid kind of sales staff. So how do you take somebody who's comfortable in inside sales and get them to be an effective face-to-face, in-person seventh inning stretch seller?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. So our inside sales team, when they start, I mean, they go through a 2-week big training to get themselves onboarded. And a lot of their first 6 months is completely on the phone. I mean, they'll rarely secure a meeting. So a lot of their jobs
They start on the phone. They're not starting face to face. They're starting on the phone.
They're starting on the phone, but they go through we hold ongoing trainings during this time to get them to that point. Our whole goal as a leadership team is like, when that spot becomes open, we want to promote from inside sales. We don't want to have to go hire somebody else who hasn't been through our minor league system, right? Like that's the goal. So we want them to be ready to be the number one AE when that time comes. So it's ongoing training. We'll have them hook up with an AE, who does a really good job, show them the ropes. They work directly with our management team on training, on what to say in person, how to build rapport, how to transition into your question path, what to ask on the discovery, how to set that next appointment. All of that is ongoing. I think that's the big word that we try and use. Like if it drops for a certain period of time, like they lose it. You have to continually train. It's the only way for anyone to remember it, to get it to that muscle memory point.
I want to know go ahead, Scott.
But that sounds like it's hard for you to do during the season. So how do you reconcile that, Andrew? Because I heard you say, well, we don't have time to spend an hour in training during the season because it's madness. But now you're like, you have to constantly train. So yeah. I'm not trying to pick on you. How do you pull it off? How do you accomplish both?
No, that's a great question. I think I more specifically, like on something like a LinkedIn, like a brand training, we probably wouldn't make that a priority. The in-person training, that's always a priority. So I should clarify that. I feel like there's certain trainings like subject line or, how to, the emails, right? Like what keywords to use. Like those trainings kind of tend on our end to fall on the priority list, when we're more focused on that face-to-face, how to get on the phone, the role play, things like that.
That's great. You said earlier, like it's you can't do it during the day. You can't do it during the season. Okay. So it's May. What am I doing as a rep? Games are playing. What's my grind like?
Yeah. So it depends if we have a day game or a night game, right? Sometimes we have a 1:00 day game, which is a totally different day than a night game. So in a day game, right, your day's kind of shot, right? Your job is to work the crowd, go out there, make your calls, set up yourself for a successful day at the game. And then from 1 to 4, you're hopefully selling. We have sales tables and things set up at the game. You're hopefully talking to different people, working the crowd. So that's your job there. On a night game, you're really working a normal day. So you're making, our goal, we have a hustle point system that revolves around calls, emails, texts, and meetings set. So your goal is to hit your 100 points that you're required to on a daily basis, and it's a weighted average on what you do.
How many calls a day am I supposed to make? How many emails? How many?
Yeah, it depends. So you could have a day, Richard, like maybe you make 10 calls in a day, but you have 4 meetings set and you went on 3 of them. Like that would be a 100-point day, right? Like that would be a successful day. There may be days where you don't set a meeting, but you have to make 80 calls because, you really couldn't get anything else going. So it varies.
Right. Do you have you ever spent any time outside of sports sales? Like, have you ever done anything else, or are you so committed?
No, so I haven't. My only non-sports sales was working the cashier in retail at Chuck E. Cheese when I was in high school. So I did that. No, I've been in the sport. Yeah, go ahead.
So what translated over from Chuck E. Cheese to professional sports sales at the Detroit Tigers? That's hilarious.
Working with seeing kids around the ballpark. That's really
right. You're still selling joy and entertainment, though. You are selling that experience, so that's pretty accurate.
Very, very smooth transition there, Richard.
Yeah, look, I got to figure it out, right? How do you, like, this is the fan in me, right? Do you get to meet the players? Do you get to go like, hang in the dugout ever? Like, what's that like?
So rarely do we ever get to go in the dugout. We do have the most time I've ever interacted with the players. Like it's pretty separate, but at our sales events that we host. So we're big here in Detroit on securing some larger names to come out, answer a little Q&A with the crowd, and then our salespeople are responsible to invite their key prospects down to that event, and we use the name, the player to incentivize them to come, and then hopefully we sell them in person at that event. So sometimes we'll have myself, or my boss. We do a sales pitch during that time frame for the crowd. So we're in front of 100, 200 people doing a quick sales pitch before the Q&A with the player. So I'll get to interact a little bit with the players there. For example, we did a virtual sales event with Pudge Rodriguez last night. So that was pretty cool. Hall of Fame catcher, former Tiger. It was virtual. We wish it could have been in person, but that was a fun interaction. Got to speak with him a little bit prior to, so that was cool.
Harder sale, NBA or MLB?
It's MLB, not because I work for the Tigers versus the Rockets, who were a perennial NBA final contender when I was there. I'd say the amount of games is a big difference.
Well, I mean, you're selling 81 games versus 41, right?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. That's the full season difference. It's hard to meet someone who says 81 games is the perfect amount of games for me, right? Like that, it seems a little.
Scott would be your ideal customer.
Yeah,
that works for me.
Right.
Yeah, no problem with that.
He would in fact, he would buy a suite and he would just work there all day. He'd even work there on off days.
I would just hang out. I just hang out there. I'm looking at Andrew's background right now, and it just brings me joy.
It's funny. We have had some companies purchase a suite and then they knock out the walls. They make a little office. So and they work there sometimes. That's something we do.
Oh, there we go, Richard. Surf and Sales HQ.
Absolutely.
Comerica Park. Right.
I can deal with that.
Yeah.
I can deal with that. What do you find to be, as you manage people, right? There's always challenges in managing people. What's it like to motivate a team when you don't have a sales team, when you don't have a successful team on the field? How do you try to motivate them? What kind of challenges do you have, running the team?
Yeah, it's something that we have to try and take the on-field play completely off the table, whether we're good or bad, from a leadership standpoint. Like if we're good,
is that the number one excuse factory that you get from the rep? How do you expect me to sell, Andrew? The team is not good. Is that the easiest default for them?
Yeah, it's either, hey, they're not interested because the team's bad, or they don't want to spend the amount, it's a time commitment thing. Those are probably our top two prior to COVID.
So how would you rebut those? Well, you're a sales rep, right? Let's turn this into a training. Hey, the team is 15-45, right? Andrew, no way am I spending money coming to a game or season tickets.
Yeah, we coach our reps to say something to the effect of, hey, totally appreciate that feedback. Honestly, I work 81 games a year, and it's painful for me to leave the ballpark and not have a smile on my face after a win. But what we found is our season ticket member renewal rate this past year was about 88%, which is crazy. It's top 5 in Major League Baseball. And there's a passion for Tiger baseball here. And folks like you who truly care about the team and care about the direction that we're headed, those are the type of fans that we need at the ballpark, that we want to have at the ballpark. So how about this? How about you come down to the park? I'll give you a private tour. If you have kids, bring them on down. I'll show you around the ballpark a little bit. I even may have an autographed baseball for you guys. I just want to have a conversation and see what, if you were to join us for next year, what that could look like for you.
Here's what I heard. I heard feel, felt, found. I heard some labeling going on, and then you pitched the demo. right? Like that was it. Scott, what did you hear?
Listen, I couldn't get over the fact that Andrew is not happy about having 81 games. I'm very fixated on this is like 81 opportunities. Like if I was selling in this environment, like every time a game was played, I'd be like, shit, that's one less thing for me to sell. Like this is interesting. Like there's a limited amount of inventory. So as a seller, I would be feeling like, man, my sense of urgency is like through the roof. You know what I mean? Like every single day, I got one less thing I can sell. That doesn't happen in software. That doesn't happen in training necessarily, unless
Very true.
you're overbooked, Richard, and you don't have the bandwidth for it, right? But like if I'm selling, for Salesforce or Vidyard or Gong or Lead 411 or sponsors, right? Let's say I'm a Gong salesperson. There's an infinite number of Gong software purchases I can sell in sports. In 162 game baseball season, 81 of them are at home. I got 81 opportunities, and that's it. And when they run out, I'm shit out of luck until next year. Am I onto something here?
No,
Andrew?
you are. I think the key is you've got 81 opportunities with X amount of people in the ballpark, right? That potentially are new leads too, right? For you to talk to. So you've got to take advantage of that time. We're not going to get another opportunity to get that many eyeballs on us during a normal season. And it's cyclical sports. That's the thing, right? Like, right now is a really downtime during winter. Baseball's over. Essentially Major League Baseball is, in a normal time frame, the World Series end. This is a very quiet time, but January 1st comes and we start picking back up. And we're always selling for the next year. Like around May, we'll transition to group sales and suite sales for like the full staff. We'll put in a full 3-month push for as much as we can for that current year. And then we flip it to the next year. So there's always something to sell, but to your point, we need to take advantage of all those games. If we don't, right, we're just shooting ourselves in the foot.
And so not all of them, but I assume there's a plethora of data when people go online and buy their tickets. So you already know they're here, they're coming to the game. You then reach out to those people and say, hey, we'd like to buy tickets, or while they're at the game, or do you do it beforehand? Like, how do you navigate that? I'm just curious the process.
No, for sure. On a game day in a normal scenario, we would pull our 200-300 seats that were purchased on maybe StubHub or purchased online that were single game purchases, and we would tag their seat with a little card that says, you have won a special prize. Please visit this table behind section 134. Ideally, they pick up their card, they bring it to the sales table. We give them a small little tchotchke as your prize, but our salespeople are working there, and the goal is to have a conversation with them. Additionally, our sales team's responsible to set up appointments during the games with folks who are coming. Maybe they bought 1 game, 2 games. We send our top right. leads prior to the game so that they know where they're sitting.
That's all. Scott, has that ever happened to you? You bought enough tickets. I've done it. I've never had anybody put a little card on my chair and tell me I won something.
No, I win nothing. I'm very bitter about this. I've been to a million games, and I think I've caught 1 foul ball, and I had 1 blast through my hand and damn near break my fingers.
I have one of those
that
broke through. Yeah.
I don't know. Nothing gets left on my seat. No.
So.
Hey, back real quick, Andrew. Back to this LinkedIn kind of training that you delivered. Do you ever use this analogy with people? Like, how many people does Comerica Park hold in the stadium? What's
roughly
capacity?
40,000. 40,000.
Okay. My LinkedIn post from today is at 32,000 something views right now. So it's 75% capacity of Comerica Park. Do you ever try to use the analogy to your sales reps? Like, look, if you build a network and create content regularly, like every single day you could fill this fucking stadium with people who are reading your stuff, reading your content, getting involved. You ever have that dialogue with them? You should if you haven't.
I'm going to steal what you just said. So thank you. I think the 40,000 to 32,000 is a great great example. We talk a lot about posts that, it's not just about selling, right? It's about providing value for people so that you can get more views and build your network like that. But I've never used the 40,000 analogy, so that's definitely what I'm going to take from this and implement.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating too, because I think you guys could write some amazing content. And again, just with the tie of sports and sales and how often it's used, and to a certain extent maybe overused, you guys would get great visibility, and you actually add some value to the community of like, oh my God, this is cool, right? Like it's different than Scott talking about his stuff or Richard talking about his, or like I don't see anybody talking about sports or sports sales and the top objections and
there's
how we overcome
there's a whole
them.
market.
Yeah,
There's a whole untapped market there. You
Yeah.
know, who's the leading voice in that particular field? I couldn't tell you who it is. I don't even know if there is one. Right? Maybe it should be us, Richard. Maybe we just need to pivot. This software game is like,
I think we need to ask Andrew for 3 recommendations to other people at the ticket teams we should talk to.
I mean, it's been a long time since I've been to Detroit. I mean, maybe we need to get out there.
I agree. I had a couple of clients up there. So did you guys?
Andrew, we gotta wrap here, but we always try to end every show by saying, how can we help you? What questions do you have for us? Is there, something that you're working on behind the scenes that you want to, give a plug to? So here we are. What can we do for you?
Yeah, I think for me, I try and do a lot of just personal research on software sales and how it connects to sports. And you asked me the question earlier about what we do, better. And I'd love to hear your take on that. And then also, just what salespeople are doing in that specific space that you feel like sports people are not even close to.
Oh my God, the list is
long.
Richard. Yeah, the list is long.
Go ahead, Richard. You go first.
Yeah, the list is fairly long. I think the sales operations piece is critical, and it's not expensive, right? Like the excuse factor I hear of, well, we got to spend money on the players is like, yeah, you do, but you have plenty of places to draw that funds from. Plus, we're supposed to be one of them. So, a certain level of guidance in here of knowing our data better and knowing how to leverage that data to sell more tickets. It feels like, for lack of a better phrase, it feels like you could sabermetrics the approach to getting that kind of piece in there, right? That's the first thing. I think that it's, at least for your team, it sounds like you guys are doing a good job of training, but I think some formalized stuff could, just from a different voice, would be beneficial for the sake of, they're tired of hearing it from you, right? Or your other sales leaders, right? I think, and that happens in every organization, right? That's why we're brought in to do stuff. I also think I would highly encourage you to hire Scott to rewrite your pitch, and I bet he would actually do it and call your actual customers and close them in a one-call close. Like he's shaking his head for those who are listening, because Scott's an awesome pitch writer, and since he's a massive sports fan, he could talk the lingo better than most. I think those would be the 3 things I'd tell you to do. So.
I'll tackle the other part of your question, I think, Andrew, which I think you were saying, what do we think that you all in the sports industry are doing better than us? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, I'd love your take on that, but also like specifically salespeople, what in software sales, how they're approaching it in a better way than sports sales people do.
Yeah. Well, I think the piece about what are you all maybe doing better is, I think you all still have the hustle, and I think that a lot of that is being automated and lost and kind of genetically engineered out of software selling. Anything from like AEs no longer want to prospect because they've got SDRs, or, booking appointments for them all day long, right? So I think, like you talked about at the beginning, how sometimes during the season you're in the office at 7:30 and like you got a night game. And so you're not leaving the stadium until 10:30, maybe. Like very few software sellers, I think, are working those kind of hours regularly anymore. And that was part of the grind, when Richard and I were kind of first getting started. So I think you still have an element of hustle that is superior than a lot of folks in software right now. As far as what you're lacking, I mean, yeah, the lack of operational excellence is shocking. The lack of utilization of modern selling tools is shocking. The lack of crossover in terms of getting help and assistance to help the sellers and the sales leaders improve is a bit shocking to me. And just staying in this kind of antiquated arena and being comfortable being 5 to 10 years behind, as you put it, like that flies against everything that makes sense as a hyper competitive professional sports organization and professional athlete, right? Like if I'm talking to the Illich family, I'm thinking to myself, this is the one area that you appear to be comfortable letting somebody else just defeat you for lack of effort. You're not even trying. Like what a competitive advantage it would be if the Detroit Tigers became the absolute business model for how to create a modern professional selling organization. You could transform your revenue like in very, very meaningful ways. So like, what are you waiting around for? You waiting for the other 31 franchises to do it? You waiting for the NBA to be the leader of the pack? You waiting for the NFL to do it? I don't understand that complacency piece. And it's very bizarre to me because nothing else about professional sports screams complacency, right? I mean, teams blow up the team if you've been, a 500 record for too long because you're not quite terrible enough to rebuild and you're not quite good enough to make the playoffs. So you trade everybody and you become terrible for 4 or 5 years. You gather a bunch of draft picks and you hope you can rebuild. I don't understand the complacency component. So those are the things that are missing and lacking, and I think that you all could be doing a better job of.
Oh, I appreciate it. These are conversations that I think are awesome to have. I defend the Tigers for a little bit here, but we are definitely working towards these. Like these are conversations we have internally. We want to be better. We want to do this stuff. I think as an industry, sports is just it's odd. I agree with you because I look at some of the companies that you just talked about, Salesforce, Gong, those types, and the cutting edge is always there. And I just feel like in sports, it's rare to find that with a team. So we're definitely.
It's a copycat league, Andrew. It just takes one.
For sure. Right. And that's my job. Part of it, right, is to push some new ideas and make sure that we're talking about these different things and having those conversations internally to get them hopefully approved.
Yeah, just take this recording and play the last 3 minutes, right, of Scott talking, and you're like, dude, this guy is telling us what we already know, and he's saying it much more eloquently, right? Imagine what he said off camera. So.
Well, thanks so much for spending some time with us, Andrew. Man, this was a lot of fun for me in particular. I love talking about sports and sales, so appreciate it, man.
Absolutely. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Richard. Appreciate you guys having me on.
All right, man. Anytime. We'll let you know if we're getting to Detroit too. We'll buy some tickets.
Sounds good.
All right, man. Catch you later.
See ya.